HOA demanded I move my yacht, didn't know I owned the lake, and shut down their events. When I first docked my yacht at the edge of Arbor Lake, I thought I had finally found peace. It wasn't extravagance I was after, it was silence. After 27 years of government contracting, mostly in classified defense logistics, I had retired early and quietly. No medals, no ceremonies. Just a one-way ticket out of deep Key Sea and a dream of owning the glassy little lake where my father once taught me to fish. I'd spent a year negotiating the private purchase of the property around Arbor Lake, a crescent-shaped, man-made body of water tucked between two gated communities in northern Georgia. It was zoned weirdly. The lake wasn't county property, wasn't owned by any city, and hadn't been managed by any HOA or municipality in nearly 4 decades. It was mine now, all 43 acres of still, quiet, personal water. And I was happy, until she showed up. Her name was Karen Whitmore, and she introduced herself by banging on my front gate with a clipboard. I should have known right then. I had bought one of the 3 remaining original lakefront homes, just beside the shallow cove on the southern end. A modest place, 2 stories, wide porch, wooden shingles, nothing flashy. My yacht Liberty's Wake was docked about 20 feet from the back deck. It was a 40-foot Sunseeker, sleek, polished, clean, and not moving. No music, no parties, no lights, no jet skis. I wasn't hosting wild night cruises. I was drinking black coffee alone on a rocking chair. But apparently, that was enough to offend her sensibilities. "Excuse me, sir," she called out when I opened the gate. Her accent was pure suburban command. "I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Arbor Heights HOA. I need you to move your boat." I blinked. "My yacht, that vessel," she sniffed, glancing past me. "It violates the community's aesthetic code. Section 6A prohibits mooring large structures within view of shared property lines." I smiled patiently. "I don't live in Arbor Heights." "Well," she pressed, "you're adjacent, and we've had complaints from multiple members about the visual pollution your boat is causing." "Visual pollution?" I repeated. She nodded like she'd just cured cancer. I should have closed the gate then, but I was too polite. "Ma'am, this is private property. I own this land." "And the lake," she laughed. "You own the lake." Her eyebrows lifted like I was a toddler who just claimed to own the moon. "I do." "Well," she snapped, suddenly agitated. "Regardless, our HOA is very active in organizing lake events, and we expect community cooperation." Then came the phrase I would come to dread. "We'll be in touch." By in touch, she meant relentless. It started small. A yellow notice of violation taped to my mailbox, warning me of non-compliance with HOA expectations. I ignored it. 2 days later, I got an email from Arbor Heights Board Outlook. Yes, Outlook. Threatening to fine me $150 per day if my yacht wasn't removed. I replied with a single PDF, the official deed and survey map showing my full ownership of the lake, dock, and shoreline. I thought that would end it. It didn't. Karen escalated. She began harassing my contractors. The gardener I'd hired to prune back the shoreline brush quit after she followed him around with a cell phone, accusing him of violating protected waterfowl statutes that didn't exist. She called the county to report me for illegal construction. They sent out an inspector who ended up laughing when he saw the hand-built bench I'd installed facing the cove. She even called animal control twice, claiming my dog, an elderly golden retriever named Sam, was aggressive because he barked at ducks. And still, she sent letters. Weekly. Each one had a new fabricated rule, a new HOA code, a new community concern. It was becoming clear she didn't care about the lake. She cared about control. I tried diplomacy. I met with a few of the Arbor Heights residents and learned most of them didn't even like her. But they were scared. She fined me $75 for having a plastic flamingo in my yard. One elderly woman told me. She said it cheapened the aesthetic integrity. A single dad confessed she threatened to call CPS because his kids were too loud one afternoon. "She's got nothing better to do," he muttered. She's bored and bored people are dangerous. I nodded, realizing Karen had turned her neighborhood into a fiefdom, and now she wanted my lake to be part of it. One Monday morning, I came out to find a sign nailed to the dock gate. Notice this dock is temporarily closed for HOA Summer Festival prep. Please remove all boats by Friday at 5 p.m. Arbor Heights Event Committee. I stood there in stunned silence. She had claimed jurisdiction over my dock, on my property, on the lake I legally owned. That was the moment I stopped treating her like a nuisance and started treating her like a threat. The sign stayed up for 3 days. I didn't touch it not because I accepted it, but because I wanted evidence. I took photos, multiple angles, dated, time-stamped. I sent them to my real estate attorney, a sharp, eagle-eyed woman named Cassandra Burke. She'd helped me secure the off-market purchase of Arbor Lake the year before, navigating a mess of old land grants and dissolved zoning boards. She called back less than an hour later. "Is this real?" she asked, her voice tight with restrained disbelief. "Dead serious," I said. "They nailed it to my dock gate. They have no standing. The HOA doesn't own 1 square inch of that water, or your dock. They're bluffing." I sighed. "I know, but the neighbors don't." I hosted a small cookout the following Saturday. Nothing big, just 6 families I'd gotten to know. People from both Arbor Heights and the other development across the lake. Stillwater Cove. All good people. All tired of Karen. The burgers weren't even off the grill when she appeared at the edge of my fence. Karen, in a wide-brimmed sun hat, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, like she was dressed for a safari in the suburbs. She didn't knock. She just shouted, "You are in direct violation of Section 8 of the HOA Recreational Use Bylaws." Everyone froze. A dad holding a can of Dr. Pepper slowly turned toward her like he'd seen a ghost. A kid dropped a frisbee. Sam growled softly at my feet. I stepped toward the fence. "Karen," I said calmly, "this is private property. You can't enforce HOA rules on a home that's not part of your HOA. You're adjacent," she hissed. "That means you fall under shared use regulation for community gatherings. That's not a real law." "Sir," she snapped, pulling out her phone like a weapon, "if you don't disband this unapproved event, I will notify the county sheriff." The neighbors stood stunned. She was threatening to call the cops on a barbecue. "Do it," I said. "I'd love for them to read the deed to you." She blinked. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then, with a snort, she marched back down the hill, heels stabbing into the lawn like little acts of vengeance. The next morning, I woke to find the signs, dozens of them, staked every 5 feet along the dock fence and the shoreline. "Notice non-compliant structure under review. This property is in violation of HOA Lake Code 4.3b. Boating activity suspended pending assessment. Arbor Heights HOA fake codes, fake notices, fake authority, but they looked official, and for the average passerby, that's all it took." I found my mail stuffed with anonymous concerns. Someone left a dead fish in my mailbox. One morning, I woke up to see "Rules Matter" spray painted on the side of my dock post in red. This wasn't just Karen anymore. She'd rallied a faction. Cassandra told me to hang tight. They're on paper-thin legal ice. Give them enough rope, and they'll hang themselves. But I couldn't sit idle. Not anymore. So I started digging. I visited the county clerk's office. I pulled HOA filings, corporate records, tax IDs, anything I could legally access. What I found wasn't shocking, but it was juicy. Arbor Heights HOA wasn't even properly registered. They'd let their corporate status lapse 6 years ago. They were operating with no valid EIN, no legal charter, and no documented meeting minutes. Karen had been president of a ghost organization. Everything she'd ever filed, enforced, or threatened was technically fraud. And worse, they had used my lake to host fundraisers, concerts, and even weddings. Without paying a single cent, I cross-referenced local event permits. Arbor Heights had listed Arbor Lake as their community water asset on at least 11 applications, all signed by Karen, all fraudulent, and all backed up with scanned copies of old maps from the 1980s before the lake was privately purchased. It wasn't just harassment now, it was liability. I compiled a 52-page report and gave Cassandra the green light. She filed 3 cease and desist letters within the week to the Arbor Heights HOA board, or what remained of it, to Karen Whitmore personally, and to the county event office, attaching proof of land ownership and misrepresentation. Then we did something more radical. We filed a formal claim for restitution. Every dollar they had raised using the lake, every ticketed event, every vendor fee, every kayak tour they'd sold during summer weekends was illegal. The total came to over $86,000 across 4 years. I thought maybe that would quiet things. But Karen wasn't done. She doubled down. She called the local news. The headline that aired 3 nights later, "Lakefront Tyrant Threatens Beloved HOA Traditions with Frivolous Lawsuit." She went on record accusing me of trying to dismantle the spirit of the community. She called my yacht an eyesore, compared me to a militia, and even hinted that I was possibly surveilling neighbors from the boat. The station didn't fact-check any of it. I was livid, but I didn't retaliate. Not yet, because I had an idea and it would turn everything upside down. If she thought a news segment would scare me, she underestimated how much I hate liars. The moment her interview aired, something shifted in the air, something subtle but real. I noticed more people walking past my gate with cameras, strangers slowing down in SUVs to stare. A few neighbors from Stillwater Cove reached out quietly, apologetically. She twisted the story. One said, "You've always been respectful. This isn't fair." I thanked them, but I wasn't done. Not until I made it public. That's when I called in a favor from a friend in Atlanta who owed me a debt from back in my defense days. His name was Mason, and he now ran a drone services company that specialized in aerial surveys and 3D cartographic modeling. I told him I needed something persuasive. He didn't ask why, just showed up 2 days later with a van full of gear and a smirk. "What are we mapping ownership lines?" I said, "and I want it visual." It took 3 days. Mason's team flew 6 drones across the entire lake and surrounding properties, using infrared to scan vegetation lines, old survey markers, and shoreline encroachments. They superimposed it all on modern GIS data and layered in public and private parcels with color-coded clarity. What emerged was beautiful. A 3D interactive map showing exactly how my private lakefront and the water itself cut into the HOA's claimed public event zones. It was visual proof that every kayak rental, every community fireworks night, every floating playground and music stage they had placed, had all been on my water, illegally, and worse, some of their docks were anchored to my submerged land. They owed me more than money now. They owed me a reckoning. Cassandra took the final map and embedded it into a dedicated webpage, along with the deeds, court filings, and a timeline of harassment. We named it Who Owns Arbor Lake? Com. Then we did something bolder. We shared it everywhere. Neighborhood Facebook groups, Reddit, local news tip lines, even the high school's community newsletter, whose editor turned out to be the granddaughter of one of my late Navy buddies. The story spread like wildfire. But the real blow came when the local ABC affiliate picked it up this time. With my interview, they aired side-by-side footage Karen accusing me of militia behavior, and Mason's map showing her HOA's entire summer jubilee floating on someone else's lake. The public turned. Suddenly, people were asking questions. City council demanded answers. The county clerk's office launched an inquiry into Arbor Heights defunct registration. Vendors who'd paid booth fees to the HOA for events on my lake began demanding refunds. And then, the sheriff knocked on her door. Karen was served with a formal notice of trespassing and misrepresentation. The HOA received a cease and desist order prohibiting any further use of Arbor Lake for organized events until a settlement was reached. But the cherry on top, I got the floating stage removed. I hired a barge crew to tow it off the lake, record it on video, and upload it as a time-lapse to YouTube. Title returning illegal HOA structures to their owner's lawn time lapse. It got 1.2 million views in 48 hours. I thought maybe she'd back down. She didn't. She organized a protest, about 30 people, half of whom were likely dragged along with guilt cookies or HOA threats, stood outside my property with picket signs, "Share the lake." "No yachts in our backyard, stop the greed," I watched from my porch, sipping coffee. They were shouting on my land about my own property. But here's the thing about escalation when you base your power on lies. The truth doesn't just defeat you, it undoes you. Because this time, she made a fatal mistake. She moved the protest onto my dock. I warned them once, politely. I even showed a laminated copy of the boundary survey. Karen called my warning intimidation. 5 minutes later, the sheriff returned, this time with a formal trespassing complaint, video evidence, and a warrant signed by the district judge. Karen and her inner circle, 3 HOA board members, were cited on the spot. I didn't press charges. I didn't have to, because what happened next was far worse for her. 3 board members resigned. The HOA's remaining funds were frozen pending civil review. A class action suit was filed by the residents themselves. The very people Karen had strong-armed, fined, and bullied into silence were now lining up to testify against her. And me, I submitted a petition to the county requesting that all future lake-related events be subject to proper permit application with the landowner's signature. Mine, approved, unanimously. Karen always looked like she had somewhere more important to be chin-high, arms crossed, clipboard clenched like a scepter. But the day she walked into the county courtroom for the preliminary hearing, she looked smaller, not physically, but stripped of armor. No HOA sash, no volunteer badge, no entourage, just Karen Whitmore. A woman with a collapsing empire of cardboard rules and imaginary borders. The courtroom wasn't even full, maybe a dozen people inside, but I saw them neighbors, former allies, the ones she once rallied with whispers and yard signs. They weren't sitting with her, they were sitting behind me. The judge was a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and no patience for posturing. She started by reading the list of complaints filed: unauthorized use of private property, falsified HOA documents, failure to file proper nonprofit status, retaliatory action against non-member residents, public misrepresentation of community ownership. Karen fidgeted. Her attorney looked like he'd aged 5 years since the first filing. My legal team presented the aerial maps first, then copies of event permits signed in Karen's hand, then the recorded threats, the protest footage, the vandalism. It was meticulous. By the time Cassandra finished, the judge didn't even look at Karen. She just sighed, removed her glasses, and said, "It is astonishing how far a fake title can carry someone until it runs into real law." 3 days later, we got the judgment. The HOA was found liable for trespassing, negligent misrepresentation, and civil harassment. They were ordered to cease all operations until properly re-registered with the state, pay $46,000 in restitution for past unauthorized lake usage, remove all signage, docks, and equipment from my waterline within 10 business days. Karen herself was fined $12,000 personally for public defamation and false statements to a government agency. But the bigger blow came 2 weeks later. The IRS opened an investigation. Turns out, Arbor Heights had claimed tax-exempt status for years without proper filings. Their entire financial history was now under review. People who'd once praised Karen's organization were now deleting old posts and group messages. The HOA Facebook group gone, the newsletter defunct, the block captains ghosted. It was like watching a castle melt in rain. But I wasn't done. Not out of revenge, but principle. Because for every Karen, there's a dozen quiet victims who don't fight back. People who just pay the fine, move away, shrink. I wasn't going to let that happen again, at least not here. So I called a community meeting, but not at a community center. On my dock, 50 people showed up. No signs, no yelling, just folding chairs, lemonade, and curiosity. I stood at the end of the pier, Sam sitting at my feet, and I spoke plainly. I'm not your enemy, I said. I didn't buy this lake to exclude people. I bought it to protect it from abuse, from greed, from unaccountable power. I paused, scanning the crowd. But what I've learned is that power only exists when good people don't challenge it. Heads nodded. I held up a copy of the GIS map, the same one that undid Karen's regime. This map doesn't just mark boundaries, it marks responsibility. I'm not asking for control, I'm offering partnership. I proposed a new committee, not an HOA, a volunteer council, made of lake residents and non-lake residents alike, advisory only, transparent, rotating. People clapped. Some cried. Karen, she didn't show up. I heard she put her house on the market. Didn't even wait for the IRS report to drop. When the for sale sign went up, someone stuck a post-it on it. Yacht free view available. She was gone in under a month. The house sold below market value. Some poetic justice writes itself. The weak Karen's moving truck pulled away. The lake finally felt quiet, not just in sound, in spirit. No drone of fake power, no clipboard check-ins, no neighbor wariness, no approved plants, no event emails written in passive-aggressive font. Just kids fishing from the dock again. Paddleboards slicing lazy ripples across the water. Conversations between neighbors that didn't begin with well. Karen said the storm had passed. Now it was time to rebuild. We called it the Arbor Waters Council, not a governing body, not a board, and absolutely not an HOA. Just a group of volunteer residents who cared about our little lake and wanted to preserve it, together. And I made a promise I wouldn't control it. I would only host it. The council held meetings on my dock once a month. No dress codes, no fines, just an open circle of folding chairs and shared ideas. We got things done, real things. Replaced broken trail markers on the public walking paths. Organized a real licensed summer concert this time, with my written permission. Even launched a community kayak share program with 5 donated boats. We invited food trucks, local artists, high school jazz bands. No one charged HOA fees. No one barked rules. And for the first time, Arbor Lake became ours. Not in title, but in trust. It wasn't just the HOA that was fake. It was the illusion that control created community. Turns out, it's connection that does that. The most surprising thing, the HOA didn't die quietly, it transformed. After the IRS investigation, the remnants of the organization settled their debts and voted unanimously to dissolve. Not a single person stepped up to revive it, but they did step forward in other ways. Rita, once Karen's deputy, offered her gardening skills to build a shared native plant buffer to reduce lake runoff. Jake, who used to collect fines, started organizing kids' fishing lessons every Saturday. Even Glenn, who once yelled at me over a pontoon slip, came over with homemade banana bread and said I didn't know what I was part of. Thanks for showing me what real ownership looks like. I nearly teared up, not because I won, but because we all did. The dock is my favorite place now, not because it belongs to me, but because it belongs to something bigger. Last fall, we held a lantern ceremony. Dozens of residents came, each with a floating lantern scribbled with something they were releasing: stress, regret, resentment. Mine, I wrote one word, Karen, and I let it go. Some people ask why I didn't sue for more, why I didn't go after her house, or press charges, or take it to the national news. But justice isn't always a courtroom. Sometimes it's a community rebuilt without fear. Sometimes it's a lake with clear water, clean shores, and no one standing at the edge telling you what kind of flowers you're allowed to plant. So if you're reading this and you're dealing with a fake HOA, a neighborhood tyrant, a clipboard queen who mistakes authority for worth, remember this: your home is yours. Your voice matters. And when the waters rise, stand your ground. You might own more than you think. What do you think defines a community, rules, or relationships? Have you ever faced unjust neighborhood authority? Do you believe HOAs should be abolished or reformed? Share your thoughts, stories, and experiences. Your voice might be the ripple that starts someone else's wave.